Hey guys, I'm Ethan, co-host of the Shield Wall podcast. First off, thank you guys so much for listening. I wanted to ask all of you who enjoy our content to subscribe and comment wherever you listen. Follow us on social media. We are on all major platforms. If you have any episode suggestions or questions, definitely shoot us an email at shieldwallministries@gmail.com.
Go ahead and turn in your Bibles to Ecclesiastes 1.
Where tempered men are formed.
We're going to be in Ecclesiastes 1. We're going to do the first 11 verses today. If you don't know what Ecclesiastes is, we don't turn to that book often. Try to flip to the center of your Bible. If you hit Psalms or Proverbs, go to the right a little bit. If you hit Isaiah or Song of Solomon, go this way a little bit, and hopefully you'll find it there. Just keep flipping around, peek off your neighbor, something like that. So, Ecclesiastes. As you guys are getting there, to begin, I want you to draw to mind the movie Groundhog Day. We just celebrated it at the beginning of the month, Groundhog Day. One of the great artistic productions of our culture in our lifetime. So if you haven't seen that movie, shame on you.
To the Shield Wall podcast.
But the movie Groundhog Day with Bill Murray. Bill Murray in his prime. Those are great days. So
if you like
the movie Groundhog Day, what happens in the movie Groundhog Day? It's about a man who gets stuck in a single day, and it just keeps repeating itself and repeating itself and repeating itself. And he gets stuck in this meaningless cycle of a single day. And it's a day that he actually already hates to begin with. And now he's really stuck in it, and he just doesn't quite know what to do. So there's kind of every single day, no matter what he does, it's meaningless. The next day starts the exact same time. The alarm goes off. The Sonny and Cher song comes on. I'm not going to sing it for you because it'll be in your head all day. But that's the movie, right? And what does he do? What's the whole movie? It's him trying to find something to do in this meaningless cycle of this day that he's stuck in. And so the first thing he does is he tries to kind of pursue kind of all of his hedonistic urges, right? He'll say, well, I've never really stolen anything. I've never really done these things. So I'm going to try that and just start trying to do that. And so he goes and he starts stealing things and he starts trying to seduce people and all these things. And it kind of follows that, but he finds out that doesn't really satisfy him. And then he finds, let's try to do something better here. So he tries to better himself, right? He tries to become all friends with everybody in town. A lot of this is to kind of woo a woman that he starts to like in the movie. But he learns how to carve ice with a chainsaw. He does everything, right? He tries to better himself and find satisfaction and kind of fulfilling himself every day. But that doesn't really lead anywhere either. He just starts back at the same day. And then eventually it kind of leads to a despair. And he actually starts trying to find every novel way he can to kill himself. The epitome of which is he steals the groundhog, takes it in a truck, lets the groundhog drive, and then drives it off a cliff, thinking, if I take the groundhog down with me, I will get out of this meaningless existence of mine. But he wakes up the next day. Now, if it was real life, it would probably end there, because usually that's what happens when you drive off a cliff with a groundhog. But in the movie, it all had a happy ending. But that cycle of meaninglessness, that's what I want you to have in your mind. Now, stop thinking about Groundhog Day because you won't remember the rest of my sermon if you're thinking about that, okay? But think about that as we read Ecclesiastes 1. I think you're going to see the author speaking to some of that repetitiveness. Verse 1, it says, "The words of the preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity." And right here at the outset, that could probably be translated almost meaninglessness of meaninglessnesses. But there's a reason they didn't put that because that doesn't quite roll off the tongue, does it? But the word vanity, we don't really use it in our culture to explain what this is speaking about in this text. So meaninglessness or emptiness, have that idea in mind. Meaninglessness of meaninglessnesses, all is meaningless. What does man gain by all the toil at which he toils under the sun? A generation goes and a generation comes, but the earth remains forever. The sun rises and the sun goes down and hastens to the place where it rises. The wind blows to the south and goes around to the north. Around and around goes the wind, and on its circuits the wind returns. All streams run to the sea, but the sea is not full. To the place where the streams flow, there they flow again. All things are full of weariness. A man cannot utter it. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor is the ear filled with its hearing. What has been is what will be, and what has been done is what will be done. There's nothing new under the sun. Is there a thing of which it is said, see, this is new? It has been already in the ages before us. See, there's no remembrance of former things, nor will there be any remembrance of later things yet to be among those who come after. The beginning of the book of Ecclesiastes. It's a bit of a crash. That's why I started with the fun Groundhog Day. This is the book of Ecclesiastes. It's wisdom literature. So before we get into the book of Ecclesiastes, before we break down this passage, I want to remind us of a couple things we did last week. Last week, we introduced the book of Ecclesiastes. So if you missed that sermon, good news is I'm going to give it to you in like 2 minutes, and you didn't even have to show up last week. So here are the big ideas of Ecclesiastes. I'm kidding. It was great. Here are the big ideas of Ecclesiastes. The author of Ecclesiastes is trying to find meaning in the world. He's seeking to find meaning or purpose or value, something that he can grasp and hold on to. And it's considered wisdom literature. So he's trying to find meaning in God's created order. So the wisdom literature of the Old Testament, we have 3 voices. We have Job, we have Ecclesiastes, and we have the book of Proverbs. Those are the 3 main voices. There are a couple other books that are considered wisdom literature in the Bible, but they're all trying to do one thing. They're trying to step back and they're trying to discern how God created the world and what types of actions, what types of heart dispositions lead to living a good life or a fulfilling life. So the Bible will say the Lord created the world through wisdom. Wisdom was this characteristic of God's, and then he created the world through his wisdom. So his wisdom is imbued into the creational order. And so we say, to live a wise life, to live a fulfilling life, I'm going to look at God's creation. I'm going to discern how he's created this thing, right? So that I can live a wise life, because I want to live a good life. I don't want to try to go against the grain of how God's created the world. That's not going to get me anywhere. So that's what we're doing with wisdom literature. And Ecclesiastes is one of the voices that is speaking into this. And we need all 3 voices, because if you only read Proverbs, or if you only read Ecclesiastes, or if you only read Job, you're going to get a wrong understanding of what God is trying to give to us through his wisdom literature. And so you need all 3 voices, and they're gonna really correct you from overreading any of the genres. Ecclesiastes is going to smooth out some things, or give some nuance, or clarify some things that the book of Proverbs will do, and Proverbs will do the same for Ecclesiastes. And Job will kind of, in a philosophizing way, give voice to what both books speak about. So you need all 3 of them. And in the book of Ecclesiastes, he is really vexed by the idea of meaning in this creation. And what he's done is he sat back and he's really observed creation. He's observed all the nations. He's observed times and places. He's observed peoples and their habits. And he's vexed by this one idea, this idea of hevel. Hevel. That's that word that was in the first verse. Meaninglessness. He says, when I really look at it all, I come to this idea that everything is meaningless. And that's the theme for the letter. And so that first verse is kind of his introduction clause to that. Hevel. He's looking at all the hevel in the world. That's a Hebrew word. Do you remember what it means? It's like a smoke. It's like a vapor. It's something that looks substantial, but when you try to grasp it, it dissipates. It disappears in a puff of smoke, as it were. It's something that is empty. And he says, when I really look at all the toil, all the work of mankind, all their plans, everything they're trying to do, in the end, all I see is that it looks meaningless. And here's the key to the book of Ecclesiastes. He's trying to find meaning in life under the sun. That's why we titled the series what we did, Life Under the Sun. And so really, it's a time in Israel's history where God is not so present in the created order. He seems outside. He seems distant. He isn't speaking into the affairs of Israel on a day-to-day basis. He's not doing signs and wonders. He's not in a pillar of cloud and fire leading his nation. He's not speaking dynamically and through very dramatic language through his prophets. He's not doing any of that. It's just the day-to-day cycles of the sacrifices, of the priesthood, of the cleanliness, of the Torah readings, etc. And God seems distant. He seems far away. And so what the author of Ecclesiastes does is he gives voice to trying to find meaning in this life under the sun. And it's almost like trying to find meaning in a life without God. So that is what we are exploring in the book of Ecclesiastes. We're trying to discern how God's created the world. We're trying to see what is the meaning of all of this. And the only other thing is this is something that's meant to be dwelled upon over the course of a lifetime. It'll speak to you different ways. So it's to be meditated upon, all the wisdom literature of the Bible. So let's look at the text again. I'm going to point a couple things out, and then I'm going to ask the guys to actually put up a slide that will organize the text in a different way, and we'll try to see the central themes that the author's speaking to. But a couple things I want to point out. That, like I said, that entrance clause, meaninglessness. This is really an introductory thought to everything he's going to say throughout the rest of the letter. It's the preacher, this guy called the preacher. And he's not really the author of the book. He's actually just the voice of the book. So he was a wise man in history, probably Solomon or someone who is taking on the persona of Solomon, this all-wise king of Israel, as it were. And so he's speaking about meaninglessness. And then he gets into, okay, let's explore what meaninglessness looks like. And the first thing he talks about is toil. What does man gain by all the toil at which he toils under the sun? Do you hear that repetition? Toil at which he toils. He's trying to draw attention to that, right? What do you think about when you think about toil? Life as toilsome, our work as toil. It should remind you of Genesis 3. It should remind you that man sinned against God, and one of the curses God put upon man is that your work would be hard. There would be toil in your work. You see, the way God designed it, man and nature were supposed to work in perfect harmony with one another. Man rejoicing in his labor, rejoicing in his work, and the creation yielding to that, and even rejoicing in the work of the man. But now we live in a broken creation because of sin. So right at the outside, he's trying to say, life under the sun, this broken creation, it's toilsome. What do we gain? What do we gain by all the toil at which we toil under the sun? He says in verse 5, he said, the sun rises and the sun goes down and it hastens to the place where it rises. That word hastens, it could actually be translated, the sun pants. Pants, as if someone who just took a sprint and they're exhausted. So he's trying to draw attention to the fact creation itself is even exhausted with its cycles. Right? He's using this imagery and these words to try to get us into this mindset of it's exhausting to see this. Even creation itself, the sun rises and it goes down and then it pants as it returns back to where it has to just do it all again. And then it does it over again. The wind blows and it just races around to blow again, then it races around to blow again. It's that repetitive cycle. You guys could put up the slide. It's the multicolored slide. Is that on the screen? I've reorganized the text for us to help us find the central theme of the text. Try to follow the color. Some of the tabbing got messed up. But what's happening here actually in this text is he's trying to draw attention to a specific part in the text. And what he does is he organizes the text in themes that either are similar or they play off of one another. And you see at the top, the green at the top, and then at the end there's green. Then you have the blue, and then you have the red, and then you have the yellow. And so there's a corollary with everything except for that yellow line. This is an ancient Hebrew poetic device to draw our attention to what he's really trying to direct our attention to. So if we take it from the outside in, right, that green voice, it says, what does man gain by all the toil of which he toils under the sun? And then at the end, it says, there is no remembrance of former things, nor will there be any remembrance of later things yet to come among those who come after. And so what he's saying, he says, there is no gain. There's no gain in anything that we're doing. He's saying if no one's going to remember it, then what did you actually gain ultimately, right? If you create the most wonderful thing in the world, and then in 2 generations no one remembers it, and in 4 generations someone creates the same thing again, and they say, look what I've created, it's so wonderful. And he's like, wait a second, that's already been created. Who cares? No one ever remembers it. What are we even gaining? What's the purpose of this all? The next, he's going to talk about repetitiveness. The repetitiveness and the exhausting nature that a generation goes, a generation comes, but the earth remains forever. The sun rises, it goes up. The wind blows around in its circuits. That's what he's talking about at the beginning. And then the other thing he says, what has been is what will be done. What has been done is what will be done. There's nothing new under the sun. Is there something new? No, there isn't. It's the same stuff, repeating and repeating and repeating. Then we go to the next line, the red ones. It's talking about insatiability. Or there's the unsatisfaction of both creation and man. We aren't satisfied, right? All streams run to the sea, but the sea is not full. To the place where the streams flow, they're just going to have to flow there again. It's never full. It's never satisfied. It's never satiated. What about man? The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing. He talks about the eye and the ear. He's trying to say, man is never satisfied. He's never content. He's never satiated. And then we have one line that doesn't have a corollary in the passage or a partner in the passage. All things are full of weariness. A man cannot utter it. And that's what he's trying to get us to. Meaninglessness of meaninglessnesses. Why is everything so meaningless? Because we're stuck in this weary, repetitive, unsatisfying, toilsome life that we don't accomplish anything in when you really look at it. Life under the sun, I just see meaninglessness. Do you hear the voice of Ecclesiastes? Do you hear the voice of the preacher? You know, I think we all experience this on some scale. Now, a lot of us aren't stepping back and looking at the world through a whole cosmic scale, right? And paying attention to world orders and really studying history and examining the future and really looking at life in all these intricate ways and paying attention to the toil of man and then tracking that multi-generations to see if people really know what that person accomplished, right? Most of us aren't stepping back and assessing the world from that angle the way the author of Ecclesiastes is. And there's a reason we don't do that, and it's because we're actually so exhausted and focused on the weariness of our day-to-day life, as it were. Right? As it is. We have our own day-to-day life. We have our own cycles. We have our own weekly cycles. To our Friday, we're just exhausted. We kick back. We veg. We do anything to just release. Saturday, we try to do something that makes us feel like we're a human being, but that kind of exhausts us more. And then Sunday is just gearing up for the new week, and we do it again. And then, the seasons, and all the seasons repeat. Life repeats. We can do that for weeks and weeks, months, years, maybe even. There's a weariness to life, a weariness to these repetitive cycles of life, a weariness to the toil at which we toil under the sun. We all feel this. Now, we might not end up at the same conclusion as of the author of Ecclesiastes as the preacher. We might not just sit back and say meaninglessness of meaninglessnesses. Everything in life is meaningless. Almost none of us will come to that point. Great philosophers who spend their whole lives doing this kind of stuff, many of them have come to that point. Most of us don't. But I think we do see that the world, everybody in the world is dealing with this reality in some way or another. And you'll see it through the way they try to escape it. Right? They try to escape the cycle of weariness. You try to escape the seeming meaninglessness of all of our toil. We'll try to numb it. We'll try to medicate it. We'll even try to ignore it. So it's going to look like a few different things, right? Sometimes we try to just, when we're trying to escape, there's an over-focus on some things that in which we try to escape. So we don't just say, hey, I've had a hard day, I'm going to watch an episode of Netflix and just, chill. Instead, we binge on Netflix. We spend a day and a half going through 7 seasons. And there's an over jumping into it, right? Because we so desperately want to just be a part of a different reality. We want our mind, we want our emotions to be in a different story. It's a symptom. It's a symptom of a world feeling this. Sometimes we'll get into this escapist mentality of fantasizing about the travel adventure life. Boy, if I could just go somewhere else, right? If I could just go and see a new place, have a new experience, something that will change my perspective, something that will bring something new and fresh into my life. We seek this newness, this novelty, something different. We're trying to escape the cycle of repetitiveness in our life. We can get overly focused on that. We can spend hours on social media coveting other people's lives. We could covet a relationship that is not our own. Boy, if my husband were just like this, or if my wife were just like this, they were like that person. Or maybe if they were just some perfect ideal that I've never actually seen existent in creation, but I wish my spouse was that thing. And of course it's vague, but it's the hope. I'm trying to escape. I'm trying to pretend or get into a life that's not my own. There's an over jumping into that. Or we overindulge. This can be hedonism in all of its forms. It could be food. We overly indulge in food. We overly indulge in sex in all of its manifestations and all of its perversions, right? We overly indulge in these things, and we do it in an unhealthy way. This could look like, I think in our culture, the opioid crisis, right? Where does that come from? People trying to get rest, people trying to find satisfaction, people trying to get a release, people trying to escape. And it captures them, and it spirals, and it becomes destructive. I think even at a very minor level, weed in our culture, right? Just keep turning to that. It's been a hard week. I'm stressed. Life is crazy. If I could just, release, if I can just get some rest, if I can just get some contentment, some satisfaction, some peace. We turn to these things. We're trying to find satisfaction. Nothing satisfying in this world, as the text said. We're trying to find satisfaction. There's nothing new under the sun. We're trying to find something new, something different, something novel. This could be an overfocus on finding or placing importance in different things in this world. Right? So sometimes we'll try to ignore it. We'll say, no, life is totally meaningful and everything has ultimate meaning. And that's why I will die on the hill of my political party, because it's totally meaningful. It's everything. And we're crushed, we're annihilated when things do not happen the way that we need it to happen. Or it could be relationships. I need this person to fulfill me completely. I need them to be everything. And we put this expectation on them that crushes them, and it crushes us because they'll disappoint. It could be an overfocus even on ourselves. I'm going to better myself. I'm going to pour more into my career at the expense of other things. I'm going to pour more into my fitness at the expense of other things. I'm going to practice mindfulness to explore who I am. I don't know what it means, but I think like the idea of being mindful is just to keep being more mindful, to figure out how to be mindful. I don't know. But I'm trying to better myself. And what are we trying to do? We're trying to gain something. We know that life is toilsome. We know that it's hard work. We know that it repeats, but we're trying to gain something. I want to gain something. I want to feel like there is progress. I achieved. And what is it? It all ends up in hevel. We're grasping. We're trying to grab it. And it dissipates. It doesn't satisfy. It doesn't fulfill. Nothing really new ever happens. These things do not satisfy. We see this in the world, do we not? But brothers and sisters, don't we see this in the church? Don't we see it in some of our own lives? You see, we believe in great and wonderful and precious truths. We believe in a God who loves us, who is near and dear, and he is with us in relationship, and he has a purpose for our lives. We believe these things. We say we do. We say it's the foundation of our life. But really in practice, we're trying to find meaning. We're trying to grasp at meaning in this weariness of life, and we live lives without God. There's a phrase for it. It's called functional deism. Functional deism. Write it down because you can use it with someone else and they will be impressed. And then you have gained something in this world. Functional deism. Deism is a belief system. It means that God created the world and he set its cycles into being. He said, okay, press start. The world is going to go and it's going to do what it's going to do, but now I'm out. And he's removed. He's removed from creation. Maybe he'll speak in here and there, but he's pretty much removed from creation. He's not involved. He's outside of. He's completely uninvolved in life under the sun. It's a belief system. It's a classic belief system. It's called deism. And a lot of us functionally in our lives, we act like deists. That God just lets this life go and I have to find all of my own purpose, I have to find all of my own meaning, I have to find all of my own release and satisfaction from the weariness of these cycles in this world. And we live our lives without God, all while claiming that God is our source and our hope and our purpose. You see, the eyes of our hearts have been shrunk down to try to find satisfaction in the things under the sun. And I think a lot of us experience the despair of the author of Ecclesiastes in a lot of ways. The author of Ecclesiastes is giving voice to this reality. It's true. It's true. You will not find hope and satisfaction, meaning, value, contentment by grasping on the things under the sun, things in this created order. Church, this ought not be so. The world should not look at the church and see it trying to do the same things that they are trying to do to try to find satisfaction and joy and hope and rest in this world. Right? That ought not be so. Because that's not what we believe. That's not what is true. That's not what is right. We believe that God is sovereign. He is completely in control of everything in creation. But more than that, we believe that God is providential. He's actively involved in creation, and he is fulfilling his purpose in this world. And so we don't believe that this world is meaningless. We don't believe that it's just repeating and it's going nowhere. We believe that it had a beginning. It has an end. God is doing something, and he has a purpose. And he didn't stay outside of creation. He didn't just say these things, but then he came into our created world. He came into this created order to show us this in his person, in Christ. And Christ says, and he says, I come to fulfill the Father's purpose. And what is that purpose? He's calling all men unto himself that they might know him, that they might enjoy him forever. And he has an eternity. This world is just a blip in the vast span of creation. It's something little, and he's created this world so that he can draw people unto himself. And there's a whole eternity with God. There's a new heaven, a new earth. And we believe these things. We believe he's given us a purpose. It wasn't just the purpose of the Son, but before he goes, he says, I give you the purpose of the Father so that it might be your purpose. It's God's entire purpose for all of creation, and now it is your purpose, day by day. There's not a moment of your day that cannot redound into eternity. Do you know that, church? There's a purpose. Creation is heading somewhere. Jesus is coming again. There will be an eternity where all is right, all is good. We will be in the presence of the Creator, perfect joy, perfect harmony with the Lord, the perfect love relationship that has existed in the Trinity throughout all time. And we'll be in a creation that works perfectly according to the Father's will. This is what we believe. This is the gospel. Is it not? You see, the gospel, what we believe, the core of who we are, we say, we were far from God. And we were far from God, and we were trying to find meaning and satisfaction in this life under the sun. God had a purpose for us. He created this world in wisdom, and he made a way for us. And we said, no, God, I want to do my own thing. And it created brokenness, and destruction, and weariness. So much weariness. But then God came to us. He didn't leave us there. God came, right? Something new happened. The world had been going in these cycles of repetitiveness that were weary and that nothing new was happening. Something new did happen. It didn't happen under the sun. Something came from outside of this created order into this created order. Something new has happened and it changes everything. And Jesus says, I am God. I am providing a way. And he said, you are far from God. There's a sin that separated you from God, but I will pay the penalty for that sin so that you can be back in relationship with God, that you can know God. And then he gives us life. He raises from the dead and he says, this eternal life that is mine, you can have that life. You can walk in it. And the purpose that is mine, that I'm pursuing, that can be your purpose. Every day until the day where you stand before the Lord in glory in eternity. This is the gospel that we stand on. It's put like this in 2 Peter 1. Sorry, guys, I think I skipped a slide. 2 Peter 1, if you could put that. Or sorry, 2 Peter 3. No, 1, 3. There it is. 2 Peter 1, 3, and 4. It says, his divine power, God's divine power, has granted to us all things that pertain to life and godliness. He's given us everything that we need to actually live life. True life, not a life of weariness and meaninglessness, but a life that has meaning that lasts into eternity, a life of purpose and joy. He's given us everything that pertains to life and godliness, living in accordance with how God actually has created us. He's done this through the knowledge of him who called us to his own glory and excellence. God has given us this through the knowledge of Christ, through the knowledge of Christ. And Christ calls us to his own glory, his own excellence. That is our future. The excellence and the glory of Christ himself, that would be our future. By which he has granted to us his precious and very great promises. You have precious and very great promises. Do you live in accordance with those? Does your life reflect that you have at the core of who you are precious and very great promises? That through them you may become partakers of the divine nature, having escaped from this corruption, this weariness, this meaninglessness of the world, having escaped from the corruption that is in the world because of sin. So church, do you have those disciplines to draw the eyes of your heart out of this created order? Do you hear what I'm saying? Do you have those disciplines in your life to stop looking for meaning at life under the sun and things under the sun, and to look outside of creation, to look to something more true, to look to something more eternal, something more sure, something that is actually satisfying, and that will last forever? Because it takes discipline. It takes discipline. This world will throw 1,000 things at you this week. 1,000 things that will try to be easy little things for you to grab onto, to escape, to numb, to medicate, to ignore. It'll be so easy to just try to grab those. Grab a little bit of them. It's hevel. It'll dissipate. It won't be substantial. It won't satisfy. It'll throw 1,000 things at you. This is the battle of faith that is before you today and this week. Do you have the disciplines to not turn to those things, to not put your faith in those things, but to instead turn your eyes to God for your hope and your joy? Do you have that discipline of being in the scriptures? Not only just reading through the scriptures so you can check it off as something on the list. I mean, reading in the scriptures to see aspects of God, God's truth, his wonder, his glory, his grace. And are you saying, oh God, what a beauty? Are you dwelling on those truths? Is there a heart of worship and praise? Do you have the discipline to make sure that's in your life? To contrast everything that this world will try to throw to replace it. Do you have the discipline of turning to the Lord in prayer and dwelling with him? Not to just tell him what you want. That's good. That's fine. He asked for that. But to praise him, to dwell on his glory, that you might find something true, something that's truly satisfying. Do you have the disciplines of sharing the gospel with others? That's the purpose for which God created the world, is to bring men unto himself that they might know him. Have you taken that purpose? Are you sharing that gospel with others so that you might see life affected in another, so that you might see someone else find satisfaction in that God, to remind you of the joy of what it is to know God? I know I talk about discipline, and we have these ideas of discipline, that it's this melancholy, morose, unpleasant thing, right? We take this from our childhood, something that we have to do. But no, it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing. Because the end of it all is joy, is it not? The kingdom of heaven is like a man who goes and he finds a treasure in a field. Oh my gosh, a treasure. I'm going to hide this. And then in his joy, he sells everything he has so that he might have that treasure in that field. In his joy, he gives up everything this world could give him for the sake of a greater joy. Something that's actually a treasure. Something that's real. Something that will satisfy for all of eternity. C.S. Lewis puts it like this. He says, if we consider the unblushing promises of reward and the staggering nature of the rewards promised in the Gospels, it would seem that our Lord finds our desires not too strong, but too weak. See, we are half-hearted creatures, fooling about with drink and sex and ambition when infinite joy is offered us. Like an ignorant child who wants to go on making mud pies in a slum because he cannot imagine what is meant by the offer of a vacation at the sea. We are far too easily pleased. Do you know that to be true? Do you know that to be true, church? Because this world is full of weariness. The author of Ecclesiastes is right. This world does just repeat itself. There really is nothing new. Yes, we come up with new technologies all the time. And you know what? They last about as long as it takes for someone to create another technology. And almost all these technologies that can be used for good and they can be used for evil, and they last just as long as it takes for someone to create a new technology, and nothing is remembered that came before. And we will be in this repetitive cycle of life, and there will be weariness. And we will toil. We live in a broken creation. There is toil under the sun. And it's going to be hard to see what we're really gaining. That's true. But we weren't supposed to find our hope and our satisfaction and our joy in this life under the sun. It was always meant to point to something else. Right? We were never meant to find satisfaction in this world. God created us for himself. What is the chief end of man? To glorify God and to enjoy him forever. That's the core of our faith. We were made for God. And so we have a purpose in this world. God has a purpose. He's given us a purpose. And we know that this world has a beginning and it has an end. And then there's an eternity. An eternity where we gain nothing less than the glory and the excellence of Christ himself. So I want to read the lyrics of this song and wrap up. It says, "O soul, are you weary and troubled? No light in the darkness you see? There's light for a look at the Savior, and life more abundant and free. So turn your eyes upon Jesus. Look full in his wonderful face, and the things of earth will grow strangely dim in the light of his glory and grace. Through death into life everlasting he passed, and we follow him there. O'er us sin no more hath dominion, for more than conquerors we are. So turn your eyes upon Jesus. Look full in his wonderful face, and the things of earth will grow strangely dim in the light of his glory and grace. His words shall not fail you, he promised. Believe him and all will be well. Then go to a world that is dying, his perfect salvation to tell. Let's turn our eyes upon Jesus. Let's look full in his wonderful face. And the things of this earth will begin to grow strangely dim in the light of his glory and his grace. Amen.
Thank you for listening to the Shield Wall Podcast. Our goal is to glorify Christ and strengthen the hearts of men. We've got more episodes on the way, so if you liked what you heard, subscribe and share. For more info and articles, visit our website, shieldwalldiscipleship.org. You can also find us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Just search for Shield Wall Discipleship. Thanks again, and until next time, hold the line.